All right, so thank you everyone so much for coming to this event. Today we're going to be talking about cultivating balance and combating burnout and imposter syndrome for entrepreneurs. But this is really for anyone that wants to strike a balance in their life. And Ashley, if you want to scoot over to the next slide. So we have awesome speakers today. We have three lightning presentations by three superstars who I'm so excited to have speaking today. So first up is Ashley Olafson, and she is a TEDx speaker and Forbes featured 4 times founder who is super passionate about uplifting others and building impactful businesses. She's amazing. She's the assistant director of women's entrepreneurship at Northeastern, as well as the co-founder of the Wildflower Company, which is a planner company, and also just like an awesome community of online that helps women in their 20s cultivate a thoughtful and meaningful life, in addition to like focusing on their businesses. Nalani Rodriguez is a leadership and executive coach who is so eloquent. I just went to one of her events last week and got to hear her speak there. So I'm so excited to hear her speak again this week. She spent the last decade helping people build energy-giving relationships with work. She works with founders, leaders, and those navigating career changes to help bring intention and awareness to work and life. She has also spoken on the TEDx stage, detailing the process and importance of designing work-life non-negotiables, which was what the workshop last week was on as well. And last but certainly not least is Lily Stairs, an internationally recognized patient advocate, serial entrepreneur, philanthropist, and a sought-after speaker. So we're very lucky to have her here today. She's the founder of Patient Authentic, a boutique consultancy that helps healthcare organizations build events and experiences for patient advocates, and the Chronic Boss Collective, a networking membership for ambitious business women living with chronic conditions. So I'm super excited to hear what they all have to say today, and participate in this workshop with them. Thank you guys so much for being here.
All right. So like Sydney mentioned, you're going to be hearing 3 kind of lightning talks today. We're going to start out by talking a little bit on from burnout to balance and how to prioritize self-care. So before we do that, I would love to hear in the chat, why are you attending this workshop? And is there anything in particular that stood out to you about the focus of this workshop? I'd love to hear a few comments in the chat why you're attending. We'll give it a second. Similarly, would also love to hear if there is one aspect of balance or burnout or imposter syndrome that you struggle with the most. Yep. So hearing our stories and how we've handled these issues, someone is on their first co-op and they're struggling a little bit with the adjustment and experiencing burnout. Starting a new job can definitely be intimidating. All right. Well, regardless of why you're here, thank you so much for being here. We're really, really happy that you are here. So when I'm talking about balance, I want to start off by just saying that there's no right or wrong way to balance, and there's also no one size fits all for balance. My goal today is to help you think critically about what it is that you value and what an appropriate balance looks like for you. Because really, all of us have such different careers, such different personal lives, and there isn't a one size fits all approach. Rather, the best that we can do is think critically about what we want balance to look like for ourselves. And I believe that balancing works when you first identify what it is that you value, then you prioritize what you value, and then ultimately you say no to what doesn't fit. And this is kind of like the key to balancing that will help you in your particular life circumstances. I also want to say that balancing is an ongoing process. It's something that ebbs and flows. And part of the reason why I'm really interested in balance is because I think that it's a huge way to take care of yourself. And I think that when you are continually reassessing what it is that you are involved with and how you're spending your time, you will be able to better prevent burnout and you'll be making good decisions, which will also contribute to feeling more secure in yourself and in your skill set. So I actually want us all to do a quick activity. I would love for us to make in the chat or, in our notes or in a journal, a list of our commitments. And we're just going to take 2 minutes to do this kind of quickly. But anything that goes on this list is a time commitment. And time commitments look like cleaning your apartment or your home. That's something that takes time. Being a friend, being a partner, being responsible for your personal finances. I give lots of workshops. I'm an MBA student. I'm a co-founder. I have my full-time role. And then the list actually keeps going because I try and make time for movement. Sleeping is a huge time commitment, right? I love eating and cooking. I think that that's like one of my favorite things in this world is to make a really, really good meal. Going grocery shopping each week takes time. Journaling, reading, walking, doctor's appointments, creating social media for myself. These are all things that take time, and this is how I'm spending my time. So I'd love for all of us to make a list because the goal is to have us look at that list and then better understand, is it aligned with our values? And how do we feel about the ways that we're spending our times? So I'll give everyone about 2 minutes and you can put a few things in the chat or you can make a list privately, but go ahead and make a list of all the ways that you are spending your time and what you are committing to. I'll give us just a minute or two. And again, feel free to pop whatever it is that you're working on into the chat, but we'll touch base in a minute or two. And I'll give it like 30 more seconds. So you can just continue writing down obligations, commitments, and ways that you're spending your time. All right. So when you take a look at your list, even if it's incomplete, what's your initial gut reaction? How do you feel about that list? Are you overwhelmed with everything that you do? Are you content with everything that you do? Do you feel dissatisfied? Let me know in the chat how you are feeling about your list. And thank you for sharing what it is that's on your list. I think a lot of times when people make their list, they feel kind of one of two ways. They feel overwhelmed, or they feel like it was actually kind of cathartic to put down everything that's floating around in their brain up on paper. I think the reason why it's so helpful to do a life audit is just to check in with yourself. because then once you kind of assess how you feel about the list, you can begin to identify what it is that you value. And then you can check to see if your time commitments are actually aligning with what you value. Now, we don't have too much time today, given that this is a lightning talk, but I would encourage you to spend some more time considering what you value most. For me, I really value 8 hours of sleep. That's kind of a non negotiable. And I'm willing to compromise on other things so that way I get that. I also know that I really value alone time. That's really important to me. And so, because of my values, I'm able to adjust my schedule to better reflect them. So definitely a good question to consider, just moving forward, is if your schedule reflects your values. And in my opinion, it's better to do a few things really, really well and to prioritize what it is that you value rather than trying to do it all and having kind of scattered energy throughout. And, this is a lesson for myself as well. Like I said, balance is ever evolving. And so it's definitely something that I am working on too. I also wonder, when you look at your list, is there anything that starts to stand out to you? And perhaps you think to yourself, maybe I should quit this, or maybe I should put less effort into this. For example, my senior year of college, when I was kind of cutting back on some responsibilities, I decided to just give myself a little more grace about grades. I was a senior in college, so I wasn't going to quit school then. But perhaps I could be a little more gentle with myself and even just, not stress myself out so much, although it was still definitely a commitment on my plate. And maybe I could put that energy towards other things that were more aligned with my needs at the moment. So definitely a good thing to consider what you want to do less of, and quite honestly, what you want to do more of as well. So that's a quick lightning talk on balance. And once again, I think that balance is really important because I do feel that when you are feeling more comfortable in how your balance looks, you are able to ultimately take better care of yourself. So thank you for listening. And these are my socials if you're interested. But I think we will probably pass to the next speaker. So thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. We could not have a better tee up to go from balance to talk about burnout. So with that, there we go. All right. So we're going to talk about designing against burnout. And I use the word designing because burnout creeps up on us. And one of the ways that we can combat it is by being really, really intentional about choosing the things that we're doing to combat it. But the word designing really resonates for me of how can we be intentional to put building blocks in place, starting with self-reflection to help keep burnout at bay. So what I'm going to talk through is we're going to define what burnout is, where you throw that word around a ton. We're going to talk about a key myth about burnout and the sources of burnout and a little bit of reflection on what that might look like for you. So in the chat or those who are on video, raise your hand or a little emoji if like you felt this way at work. Maybe you feel this way right now where you're just like, oh my God, like, blah. I see some laughing for those who are on video, and I welcome anyone who's not on video if that feels safe and accessible. Would love to see some faces. Yep, some people are saying definitely been there. Cool. So burnout does look a little bit differently for everyone. Many of us might relate to this GIF, but I want to talk about first, instead of defining burnout first, what are we aiming for? What is it that we do want to feel if we don't want to feel burnout? So in my view and in my experience working with lots of people one-on-one through coaching, I find that what we want to feel is feeling resourced to do what it is that we want to do, really connected to the exercise you just went through with Ashley about what are my values, what do I want to prioritize, and how do I have enough energy to do those things and not just feel drained at the end of the day and have to push all of those aside because there's no energy left. The other thing that I think most of us are aiming for is experiencing harmony in the different parts of our life. So another definition of balance here, maybe you want tons of your energy to go towards work because you really love it, and some of your energy to go towards your social life. just because they're not even doesn't mean you're not experiencing balance. That level of harmony of saying, yes, this is how I want it right now, and from a place of choice, that's really my vision for all of us when we talk about what we're aiming for as the opposite of burnout. So, to define burnout for a moment, I believe that burnout happens when our personal whole life needs are consistently not met. So those values that you talked about that Ashley talked about and you might have written down, needs is another term for the things that we value, the things that we need to be a human in this world. So what I mean by those are we all have needs for rest, we all have needs for connection, for community, for love, for collaboration, for support, for acknowledgement. There's a whole set of what we'll call universal human needs that some are going to be more important to some people than others. But when the ones that we most value go unmet, unfulfilled for a prolonged period of time, that's when burnout happens. And this isn't just like, oh, I didn't experience this one thing yesterday, so I'm burned out today. This is, cumulative effect over typically weeks and months. So a typical response to, oh, you're feeling burned out is like, you need a vacation. I suspect some of you, I'm seeing some laughter. I suspect some of you either have said that to yourself before, or maybe you've heard that from other people of like, well, why don't you take a vacation? This is usually what we think we need. And it might bring some short-term relief. Maybe it doesn't. But I really think that this is a myth. And I don't just think this, I know this from personal experience and working with hundreds of people who are going through burnout, both within organizations, when whole teams are burned out, but also individuals. So if the myth is taking vacation will fix my burnout, the reality is taking a vacation, depending on the type of burnout you're experiencing, might actually make it worse and prolong it. And the reason is you're then taking a small break and you're stepping back into a system that hasn't changed. You haven't changed your priorities, your work environment or your life environment or your family environment, whatever might be some of the source, those also haven't changed. You just took a little break. And so maybe it does make it better for a little while, but if the system around you, your inner system and your outer system, haven't had any shifts, you're going to continue and the burnout's going to continue to compound. And so a way to get to the root of this is thinking about the sources of burnout. So there's three primary sources. You may experience one, all three, just two. And so the first one is probably the most commonly talked about, emotional exhaustion. So when you just feel like you're carrying too much for too long and you're not prioritizing and not doing that exercise that Ashley walked us through. What can I say no to? What can I pause to lighten the load? The second is depersonalization. So this is where maybe you're not caring or you're not feeling care from the people that you're working with, and you're not feeling compassion, and it just feels like the interpersonal piece of what you're doing has evaporated. And so there's no connection or appreciation or just human thoughtfulness, maybe. And so then it turns transactional. What you're doing is just like, I do this and then I do this, and it like lacks that passion in that life. The third source of burnout is around accomplishment. So this lower experience of accomplishment where it's like everything I do doesn't matter. You're likely not feeling appreciation or getting feedback for what you're doing of any like constructive like forward movement. It kind of this stuck like I'm just here, things feel futile. So I'd love for a moment, whether you're in the middle of burnout right now, if you've experienced it in the past or think you might in the future, I'd love for you to throw in the chat which of these feels the most resonant for you. Which of them is like, oh yeah, that's the flavor, that happens to me. Just like whatever sparks, yeah, emotional exhaustion, decrease of accomplishment, someone else. Yeah, it could be all three again. Curious if just your energy spikes when you think of a certain one of these. Yeah, emotional exhaustion. Yeah, okay. That first one is resonating with a lot of folks. We have a few on the others. Cool. So the key thing that I want you to take away from this part of our conversation today is that if you're in the middle of burnout, finding the root is the only sustainable way to then design change to get out of burnout. If we're not addressing the root issue, it's going to keep continuing. So maybe screenshot this. I believe the slides will be shared after, and I think there might also be a recording. This is a really good cheat sheet to come back to say, hey, what's the flavor that's happening for me right now? Because it might be different this year versus next year versus 5 years from now. We all go through cycles. And so this is that recipe for, okay, let's figure out what the source of it is. And then with that knowledge, we can then take steps for change. And so if we're going to role play this for those of you that are in the middle of burnout right now, what that would look like is you pause and say, okay, first, which of these 3 types of burnout am I experiencing? Again, could be one, could be all 3. And then a baby step would be, what is something I could ask for? Well, you could ask for it from yourself and say, hey, can I change priorities? Can I cancel a plan? What's something you could ask for tomorrow from someone in your life that could be a tiny step toward addressing this root? So it's using the need to say, how can I make the smallest change to honor that need? I really am feeling this sense of depersonalization. Okay, what would it mean to feel more connected again? What's like some small thing I could do to fulfill that and bring that feeling back, even if it's not at work? It could be anywhere in your life. And burnout can also come from anywhere in our life. We usually talk about it from work, but hard family situations, hard friend situations, those can also be sources. So this is my wish for all of you, that you have this in your back pocket if and when burnout comes around again, if it's hopefully not here now. But again, I've gone through so many cycles of it and I keep learning. And to me, it really is valuable information that focuses us back to our values and our needs to really keep confronting our own self-care. Right. Thank you for this little bit of the sliver of your day. And what a beautiful build from Ashley. And I'm excited to pass it over to Lily, who's going to continue on talking about imposter syndrome.
Thanks, Nalani. Such fabulous presentations. I always learn so much from both of you ladies. Okay, let me just get this into presentation mode. Oh dear, what have I done? Oh, there we go. Okay. So we heard about balance and burnout, and imposter syndrome is a little bit different, but it is connected. And I want to talk a little bit today about how imposter syndrome actually can really exhaust us and be a contributor to disrupting that burnout and balance. But primarily, I want to talk about this concept of flipping the script and embracing imposter syndrome as opposed to fighting it. Most people will tell you, when you hear people talk about imposter syndrome, you're often hearing it in the ways of, oh, how do I get over imposter syndrome? How do I fight imposter syndrome? But today we're going to talk about, if we flip the script, what would happen if we embraced it? So first things first, defining imposter syndrome. What does it even really mean? We throw this term around a lot, and then it is defined as a psychological condition that is characterized by persistent doubt concerning one's abilities or accomplishments, accompanied by the fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence of ongoing success. So, again, it's just that feeling that, oh gosh, I don't really know what I'm doing. Here's the thing. No one really knows what they're doing. No one, seriously. CEOs of massive companies, Jeff Bezos, he didn't know what he was doing. He probably still doesn't know what he's doing half the time. He's innovated and paved the way in so many ways, and innovators don't have guarantees. You don't know what 100% what's going to happen. We're all imposters. So what's funny is that I wanted to just share and level set with you that when I was asked to give this talk, I actually experienced imposter syndrome about giving a presentation on imposter syndrome. And Nalani and I talked. Nalani's a dear friend of mine, and we went out for coffee a couple of weeks ago. And I was telling her that, she's like, you have to say that in the presentation. I said, you're right. And the whole reason was, well, I said, I don't talk on this. Ashley and Nalani, both of the topics that they spoke about are something that they know inside and out, that they present on all the time. And I tend to present on Well, and a number of other things. I'm always presenting on a series of different topics, which I won't get into right now, but I've never presented on imposter syndrome. And so I was like, oh God, why did they pick me? There's got to be better people to do this. And then I said, oh dear, I am having imposter syndrome and I shouldn't, because I can speak on this topic. Anyone who's experienced it can speak on it. So there you go. People have this all the time. So I happened to be a couple weeks ago, headed on my way up to a wedding in New Hampshire, and I'm based in Boston. I was headed up to a wedding in New Hampshire, and I was looking for a podcast with Seth Godin on it. He's just like a prolific marketer and innovator and community builder. And what came up when I typed in his name, but a podcast he was on imposter syndrome. And I said, oh, I have to listen to this. And so his whole idea was that we should stop fighting imposter syndrome and accept it, because the reality is that we are all imposters. And I really liked this quote from him specifically on the podcast. You have to acknowledge the fact that you are afraid, and you have to acknowledge the fact that you are an imposter. If you want to fight the fear and fight the feeling of being an imposter, you're going to exhaust yourself. The fighting is what's making you stuck. So again, we're all imposters. Anyone who's doing something different, something innovative, something new, it means you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. That's a good thing. And so you need to think about, stop fighting it. Say, hey, I belong here. I deserve to be here. Give yourself some affirmations and keep going. And so I want to, here we go. Oh no, it like skipped. I don't know where it's going. Hold on, here we go. All right, this is what I want to do. I wanted to give you my personal experience here. So one of the greatest challenges I faced when it comes to imposter syndrome in my career has been age. And I imagine that for many of you who are on this call today, you're in a similar boat, especially if you're a student or you're early on in your career. Our society often associates age with credibility. And so I would often feel like an imposter all the time in work, simply because of my age. And I said, oh, well, I'm young. And we're always told, well, those people who have more experience or who are older, they know what they're talking about. We should listen to them. I'm just getting started in my career. I'm younger. I don't have the same cachet and credibility. That's simply not true. We all have something to bring to the table. And so what I did, though, I was jumping through hoops all the time to try to fight this imposter syndrome that I was feeling. And so here are two examples. Let me walk you through the examples. So I would say I would hide my year of graduation. I wouldn't put that on my profile anywhere. Resume, LinkedIn, you couldn't see it. It just said Northeastern University. And then I also, and this was kind of fun, and this is the PR gal in me, and I love to put a spin on things, but I would say right out of college that I had over a decade of experience as an advocate. Now, obviously, I was just out of college, so I didn't have over a decade of experience in the professional world, but I had started advocacy in high school. I started an anti-bullying club when I was in high school, and I was advocating on behalf of people who were, the underdog and being treated poorly. And so I said, well, I'm gonna say I've been an advocate for over a decade. And then when I took the year of graduation off my profile and I had that in there, people may have thought, she's not just right out of college. I certainly didn't come across as I'm like a, super seasoned. I've been in the industry for a long time, but it probably added a few years in people's minds to where I was at. So I'm not going to say you shouldn't do that, right? Because I do think that made me feel better in the time. It helped me feel better and me to show up more fully. And so I think that it's okay to use these tips and tricks to navigate against imposter syndrome. But what's really interesting is that when I stopped fighting this thing that made me feel lesser than, and I embraced it, the results were actually way better. And let me show you. So this is a post. This is a piece of a post. Obviously, there was text with it. But on my 30th birthday last year, I said, I'm done hiding my age. I'm not going to pretend that I am not, some, again, seasoned executive. I'm going to come out and I'm going to say I'm 30 years old on my birthday. So I posted this picture of me pouring rosé, and I wrote a post about how proud I was of what I had accomplished by the age of 30, and that I was sick of being dismissed by people because of my age. I talked about how I was turned away before I started my own company. I was turned away by a biotech company that I found out behind the scenes this is illegal, but they didn't hire me because of my age. They said I was too young, and stepping into a director position would have upset the apple cart. And I said, I'm done. I'm done. This is who I am. You want to work with me? Like, look at all these great things I've done. Doesn't matter how old I am. I know what I'm doing. So when I did that, the reception was remarkable. I had nearly 100,000 impressions on this post, over 1,000 engagements. For the record, on my LinkedIn, typically I would say, I get a couple thousand impressions. This was far and away best post ever. I've launched 2 companies now. I post all kinds of other exciting things. This post far and away has done the best. And that was because I embraced something that made me uncomfortable. I owned my narrative, and I showed up with authenticity. And so the best piece of advice that I can give when it comes to imposter syndrome is, don't be afraid to show up and be honest about what you're experiencing, because a lot of the time other people might be feeling that too. And so when you're able to be brave and to come forward and to own your narrative and to say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through, people love it. People connect with you. So there's just nothing more powerful than owning your narrative and leading with authenticity. And so, again, instead of, I fought imposter syndrome, and yeah, it probably served me in some capacity. But when I actually embraced this imposter syndrome, I would say it served me way more. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to hear from Nalani and Ashley. I don't know if you guys have any tips that you wanted to share around imposter syndrome. I know you guys had some thoughts when we first talked, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you guys want to jump in and share anything on this?
For sure. I can elaborate on something I put in the chat, and I loved what you said, Lily, of like, it has served you well, and it can be telling us something. And in my work and in my own life, I often think about, especially fear, which is behind imposter syndrome, as it's data. It's trying to tell us something, and it's typically trying to tell us that we really care about something that we're doing, that we really probably want to be in connection with other people and not be ostracized or dismissed. And it's also probably telling us that we just want to be loved. Like, I know we don't use that word in like the workplace in the same way, but like that connection with other people, to me, imposter syndrome and that fear is usually just a little flag in my life of saying like, hello, like you're feeling this way because you care. And when I can acknowledge that, it's easier to then make the shifts that you're talking about.
Oh, so well said, Nalani. Nalani always like comes out the gate with something really just perfectly and beautifully crafted. I'm like, how did you not, did you prepare that ahead, Nalani? No, she didn't. She didn't. I know she didn't. She just had it all in her head. Oh God, she's brilliant. Okay, Ashley, anything you want to add on?
Yeah, I was also just going to say it's really interesting because there's been a lot of research that's been done on confidence, and what we know is that confidence actually builds with action, but unfortunately, imposter syndrome and insecurity is what holds us back from taking action, and it makes us hesitant. The only way to overcome this, though, is to just do it, quite frankly, and to take action. And through taking action, messy and imperfect, we will build our confidence in the long haul. So it is definitely a complicated challenge that requires you to do what is hardest. But ultimately, that's how you build your confidence. It's through trying, it's through failing. And I think that's really how you combat a lot of imposter syndrome, as well as by putting yourself out there like Lily has so beautifully done. And over time, all of that adds up and is scientifically proven to build your confidence.
Okay, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. And that is totally the message that we're trying to get across here. And actually, as I close out my presentation, Ashley, that aligns perfectly with how I wanted to close out. So I don't want you to just accept imposter syndrome. I want you to embrace it, because if you are feeling like an imposter, that means you're up to big things. You are doing something that is pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. You're innovating, you're making an impact, and the world needs you to keep going. So embrace it, build your confidence, keep going. It's going to end up leading to really big things. So thank you. And I'm excited to now open up the discussion, just to let you guys jump in and share from any of our presentations. We can talk more about balance, burnout, or imposter syndrome, or whatever else is on your mind. We'd love to have you jump in and just ask some questions, share your thoughts.
Yeah, feel free to throw in the chat or come off mute. There's not too many of us today. If you have a question, someone else probably has the same question.
I can go. That's okay.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, thank you all for your presentations. I thought they were all very insightful, and I just love hearing your stories. I guess this is my favorite question to ask a lot of people. It's like, what's the best and worst advice you've ever gotten, either about among these topics that you shared, or just in general? And I also apologize, my voice is almost gone, so sorry, it's so squeaky.
That's a great question. And I don't know that it's going to be the best and worst I've ever gotten, but I can give you something that's really top of mind for me right now that I'm hearing a lot of. And I dropped this in the chat. So this for me, and this is a little bit more around balance and boundaries, but I have been giving way too much of my time away, way too much of my time. And I'll tell you something, if you're on this call, you're probably a mover and a shaker, and people are going to want your time. You have to really drill down. So this is the best advice I've recently gotten from my business coach, is that I need to be implementing stronger boundaries, and you cannot say yes to everything. So anytime something comes on your plate, whether it be business, school, social, you need to evaluate it and say, okay, how does this serve me? Is this going to make me happy? Is it going to fill my cup? Is it going to help me hit my goals in my business and get where I want to go? And if it's not either of those things, it has to be a no. And it can be a nice no, but you have to be able to set those boundaries, because if you keep doing all of these little things and giving everybody your time, it's going to prevent you from hitting those bigger goals, and it's taking you away from those things that you're trying to do. So that's the best piece of advice I've gotten recently. And then worst piece of advice, and this ties very directly to my presentation, is that I have always just decided that I was going to show up pretty authentically when it comes to really personal things that I've dealt with. So, right, my whole platform has been built on the fact that I live with 3 autoimmune diseases, and I talk really openly about that. I've talked really openly about that in every job interview I had and before starting my companies. And so I actually had people tell me when I was first diagnosed, and this was many people, family, friends, coworker, or colleagues, I should say, would say, well, maybe do you think you should really talk about your chronic condition? Like, do you think you should be talking about that? Do you think that could be working against you? And I just knew in my heart that it was the right thing to do. And I knew that I was going to be able to connect by owning my narrative. I could make an impact, and I could bring people along with me. So that was a bad piece of advice. And I trusted my gut, and I was really glad I did.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you didn't take that advice, or the bad one.
Thank you.
I'm actually happy to take, or Nalani, I don't know if you want to finish that question. There's another question in the chat that I like, that I feel I'm better suited to answer. So
Yeah, let's ping pong and keep adding stuff to the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. Ashley, why don't you take the next one?
perfect. Okay, so I love the question. How do you approach situations where your imposter syndrome is valid, meaning you have a problem you aren't fit to solve? And I think this one definitely resonates with me, because when I was a teenager in high school, I decided that I wanted to tackle self-esteem and unhealthy relationships and big mental health problems by giving workshops to my fellow high school students on all these topics. So this was a pretty ambitious thing for a 15, 16-year-old to be dealing with. And I was unqualified in a lot of capacities. I'm not a licensed mental health worker, right? I'm not a school counselor. There's a lot that I'm not qualified to talk about. And more importantly, I'm not always, the best person to be talking about beauty standards or, different topics. So what I did in this situation was I was very honest about what I did bring to the table, as well as what I didn't bring to the table. And what I did bring to the table was that I was a teenager who was firsthand seeing the impacts of low self-esteem and unhealthy relationships in mine and my friends' relationships. And I was also, like I said, not, a licensed social worker. And that's why I heavily involved the social workers and the people in my network at my school district. Whenever I was giving a workshop, I would bring in greater support systems like guidance counselors. And although a lot of people initially were thrown off, given how young I was and my, passion in solving these big problems, I learned a lot, and I really proved myself over time and got to a place where a lot of parents would tell me and my team that the work we were doing was significantly more powerful than therapists. And that was kind of frequent feedback that I heard after years of running summer programs. And so I think just being super honest about here's what I do bring to the table, as well as here's what I don't bring to the table, is really great. And I will say, I've seen in a few job descriptions, like a year ago when I was job searching, I saw job descriptions that would say, here's why you might love working at this company. Here's why you might not love working at this company. And I thought that was such a great way to really assess fit. And I think the more open and honest you can be about, here's why you might love my work, and here's why you might not love my work. Here's why you might need to supplement me with other voices, the clearer all expectations are.
I love that, Ashley. And the thing that kept coming up as you were talking for me was the idea of how we let these things impact our identity. If someone says like, well, you're not a social worker, that doesn't need to be an attack on your identity, that what you do bring to the table isn't valuable. So to that question
And
in the chat,
more importantly, I was bringing the experience of a 16-year-old girl, which a social worker didn't have, right? So the two perspectives are actually very complementary. And students, 14-year-olds and 13-year-olds, wanted to listen to me. And they weren't always as open to the adults in their life, even though a lot of the times we were, saying very similar things. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I love that. And I imagine that for many of us in workplaces, like the value might not seem so clear, where you're like, no, I get these people, like I am these people, I'm their age, all these things in a workplace. That idea of like, just because I don't have this one skill, like doesn't mean that I'm not cut out for this role, or that I don't have something to contribute. And so the more we can disidentify from either our own thoughts of saying like, well, I don't know how to do that thing, or someone else explicitly telling us, the more we can tune back into, well, here's what I do bring and here's why it's valuable. I love that example that you brought, Ashley. I'll keep moving down the chat. Lily, was there anything you wanted to add on that one?
No, I think you guys covered it, and we've got a bunch. This is fabulous. Let's keep going.
I think
so
Nicole also has her hand raised right now.
Let's go through the two questions in the chat, because I think they were there first, and then Nicole, we can go to you after. Cool. So I'll go to the next question, which was, do you have any tips for students specifically who don't feel like they can cut anything out on their time commitments? Great. Both of these, actually, these next questions are like great coaching questions, because the framing of these are like, I can't tell you what to cut out. No one but you could tell you what is possible, right? And so what I would do with this question is reframe it in a bunch of different ways. So I would ask you, is it really true that there's nothing you can cut out? Like, how can you know? Can you 100% know there's nothing you can cut out? And then it was like, if you were only able to do one thing this week, this month, this semester, and you had to choose from this list, what is the one thing? that falls to the, not falls, rises to the top. And so asking questions that really challenge the assumption you're making of like, nothing can fall, I can't prioritize, even if it kind of feels silly to like go to those extremes. That's the way I would approach a challenge like this, of really pushing yourself and saying, okay, but if I had to, and are the assumptions I'm making really true? And then also going back to your values of saying, from the first exercise that Ashley walked us through, what are the things I most value and which of the things in my commitments fulfill those and which of them don't really? And is there another reason why I feel like a little taste of how I'd approach it? Ashley, Lily, anything else?
Yeah, Nalani, amazing, perfect. The other thing I would add tactically is I think that figuring out a way to like what from a schedule standpoint, you've got a lot on your plate. How are you blocking your time? And so thinking about strategic, are there ways that you can more effectively block your time so that everything on your plate doesn't feel so overwhelming? And there are a lot of different strategies that we don't have time to go into with that, but I do recommend actually taking a holistic look at your schedule and figuring out, like literally blocking your calendar and saying, this is when I'm going to do this. This is when I'm going to do this. Because if we're not being efficient with our time, it sometimes can make us feel way more overwhelmed than we need to be.
Which of us wants to take the next question around guilt? I can chime in, but Lily, Ashley.
I think, yeah, I think like what comes to mind, the question is, could anyone chat about the guilt that comes up when making time for non-work or personal things, especially when work is falling behind? So I think for me, I think that, you know, in order to sustain ourselves in anything that we're putting ourselves into, it is really important to take care of ourselves and sleep and eat and do all of those, you know, like things that bring you like your life. But also, you know, I think it's also really important to make space for the things that fill your cup as well. And I think like, I think I'm curious more about what it is that you are doing for work, because I frequently feel like as founders, you know, there's always more that you could be doing, and there's always things that are falling behind. And so I guess what comes to mind is, if you work at like a larger organization, maybe like raising your hand and kind of acknowledging that like there is too much work, and there needs to be more of a team support. But also, I think if you are working for yourself and perhaps things are a little more flexible, okay, you're working on your own venture. Okay, so in that case, what I would do is I would probably just get really clear with what you can actually do each and every single day. So making a list of 4 to maybe 6 things, or maybe even less than that, of what you're going to accomplish every single day. And the reason why is because then you have your expectations for that day, and then you can make a second list with everything that, you know, is on your mind but will get accomplished like later during that week. And I think just like prioritizing in a daily way. And I would also say on that list of 4 to 6 things, give or take, you should also be adding the things that you have to do to take care of yourself too. So for example, you know, maybe I have my list of bigger tasks, but then my list of smaller tasks is actually going to include doing my makeup or doing my skincare. Because if I'm giving a workshop and I want to wear makeup, that is something that needs to get done, you know? So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Would love to hear other thoughts as well.
No, nailed it. Cool. Nicole, got a few minutes left.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Actually, I do just have one thing to say in response to that person. Again, not that this is my presentation, but I've just been having really insightful conversation with other mentor women in my life. And someone offered me this beautiful affirmation that I really loved, because I'm going through a period in time in my life where I want to change, and I am in the process of changing so many things, and it is so much, and they all need to change, and I all want them changed yesterday. So the affirmation that they offered me was that I agree to allow my timeline to be longer than I anticipated. And I just found that really beautiful, you know, on a short-term scale. Maybe I didn't shower today and I really want to shower, but I can shower tomorrow morning. Or maybe I didn't do all my grocery shopping today, or maybe I didn't build my business within the 4-month time frame that I really wanted to build my business. And instead, I'm going to allow myself another 4 months. Anyways, hope that's okay that I offered that. I would love to transition now into my question. So it's piggybacking off of the discussion that you, one of the very first questions that you had, and I'm just going to ramble a little bit with where my mind's at. I am within the process of transitioning my career a little bit. It's like I've been working within the social impact sector, and I would like to transition more to the private sector, working in self-development, working in coaching. And I don't have the necessary or the perceived necessary skills or qualifications. I don't have a degree in social work. I have not spent 10 years working in the people and culture of corporations. I actually just checked out everyone's LinkedIn a little bit as we were having this discussion, and I see that a lot of people have background in really building this corporate career and building these corporate skills to then start their own LLC. While I don't have that, Ashley, what you were talking about, I do know that I have skills that are valid and that are relevant to individuals that are seeking this type of information, this type of help, this type of coaching. Lily, I really love your piece on age, because I feel young, and I feel that that is definitely something that I sit with a lot. So I'm curious to pick all of your brains for some advice that you would have for someone like me who is seeking to transition into this sector of self-development, and marketing the self, and how to begin getting that ball rolling. You know, I don't believe that my first step should just be open an LLC and start a website and immediately start taking on clients. I do think that there needs to be a bit of a buildup, and I'm seeking to begin working in the private sector. I'm seeking out individuals to do like personal assistance, personal coaching, operations assistance, kind of beginning to solder together all of these skills that I have. So that was a very broad question, but if you do have a general answer or just thoughts, I'd really appreciate it.
I would say what comes to mind is, first of all, so exciting. Congratulations on wanting to make this pivot. Very exciting. And I think like one kind of more tangible piece of advice that I would give you is, as you are embarking on this new journey, lean into your existing network and initially offer your services to people or organizations that you feel would be a good fit, either at a lower cost or perhaps for free, depending on like where you feel your skill set is at, in exchange for early feedback, early testimonials, early referrals. But I think like that's a great way to kind of get the ball rolling, especially with people that you may already have a little bit of a relationship with. And I think too, like it's okay to be honest, like we've talked about what you do bring to the table and what you don't. And I think even explicitly saying publicly, I'm looking for feedback, I'm really excited about this, if anyone is interested in chatting with me further, I would be really interested. And you can make the ask a little bit clearer and more specific than that. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with addressing that you are early stage, but you do bring a lot to the table. Not sure if anybody else has any other thoughts.
I do. This is so directly connected to what Nalani does, though, that I really want her to be able to say. I'm going to try to do this in like 30 seconds. I just want to say, I don't think you have to have I don't think you have to go get more experience. I don't think there's any reason you have to go work in the private sector. It's the way that you even just spoke and communicated and explained. It sounds to me like you are harnessing a lot of those core skills already that you need. And it's about tapping into your existing skill set and finding ways to elevate that and market it. So I would recommend, if I'm looking at like a tangible piece of advice to give you, is really follow the people that you admire in this space that you want to be. Go watch what they're doing. How are they marketing themselves? What are they talking about? And then begin to mimic that and figure out how you can. But I guess my thing is like it's feeling like you have imposter syndrome a little bit. And I'm encouraging you to push through and break out of that and ask yourself, do you really need to go work in the private sector? I don't know, to do what you want to do. And Nalani, you go ahead, because this is your wheelhouse. So I'm going to stop now.
I mean, I could talk about this for ages, and I know we're right at time. So I'll say something that's maybe a little like counterintuitive. And I'll caveat it by saying, if you want to explicitly work with a certain population and they're in the private sector and you want that shared context, like by all means, yes. But to me in my journey as a coach, and I started coaching when I was 26, so like, believe me, this like age thing is like really, really real. Being a coach to me is not about your knowledge and not about your experience in this self-development space. Like, I'm talking specifically to Nicole right now. It's about how you are with people. It's your way of being. And that you can cultivate without any specific job, any specific track record. It's that Maya Angelou quote of people remember how you make them feel. And so I have chills saying this, because so many coaching programs will teach you what to do, but they often don't teach you how to be with people, which is really what coaching is. Yes, wonderful questions help, and maybe some shared context helps. But if you know in your heart that this is work that you're meant to do, you can practice that way of being with your friends, with your family. And this is a hugely word of mouth business, and it's infectious when we show up with so much presence with people. So that's the meta, slightly less tactical advice. But I hope it might be a little bit helpful. Great. We're right at time. Sydney, any parting words before we wrap up?
I just want to thank you all again so much for coming, and thank you, Nalani, Lily, and Ashley, for speaking. It was so insightful, so thoughtful. And it was great to hear you all like collaborate and add to what each other was saying and support each other. It was really amazing to see. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Sydney. Thanks everyone for being here.
Everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Happy Monday.